So again, I'm joined by Chris Wassel. He's written for DobberProspects, as you mentioned. He hosts Fantasy Hockey X, I believe, Awesemo, Fantasy Doctors, Sporting News, all over the place. You can catch his link to his Twitter account there to get the latest from. He also retweets a lot of good stuff too. Obviously, supports those around him. But now we're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline, which comes up in about 11 days here. Always one of my favorite times of the year when it comes to sports. I love watching trade deadline coverage in general. The last couple years, the trade deadline day itself has been a little bit more quiet, and a lot of deals have taken place up to that point. So, Chris, let's start in the East. I guess the standings are a little bit more separated in the East than they are in the West. So, what teams do you see as sellers right now in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, at least the East is easier.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of sit there and go through and go, okay, well, this team, this team, this team, this team, this team, etc., and have an idea of what they're probably even selling at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
your list is simple: Ottawa, Detroit, and Florida from the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
You can make the slight argument, may Buffalo may get to that point by the deadline. They're about, let's see, by my math, they're 4 points out. I mean, it could happen, but they do have a game in hand
Mm-hmm.
on Pittsburgh, so not just yet. We'll hang. We'll kind of like put them on the back burner. Um, Philly, you can't count out to try and make a move. As a matter of fact, they're in on, believed to be in on Cam Talbot at least, from what Darren Dreger and even Bob McKenzie kind of hinted at earlier today. So I'm not going to count Philly out as they may be more of a buyer at this point, at the deadline, to try and make a push.
Yeah.
Be tough because look, it's a long road for them to get to. You figure 8 points out and 25 games left. It's doable.
Mm-hmm.
And once upon a time, 2006, the Devils were 15 points out of the division lead, and they made it up in 16 games.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it is absolutely possible at this point. But from the Metro, obviously the Rangers and Devils are definite sellers. There's no question about it. It's just a question of how much they do sell.
Mm-hmm.
The Rangers have guys like Hayes, Zuccarello, um, VC, maybe McLeod goes back to Nashville for a seventh rounder. I mean, oh wait, that actually freaking happened.
Yeah.
It's like
Right. Just
you
all over
joke
the
about
place.
the. I love saying that to people. It's like, McLeod's just going to go back for a seventh rounder and get it over with. And sure enough, like about
Mm.
3 days later, it actually occurred.
Yeah.
But those are the five main sellers from the East. Now, Florida's interesting only because they may actually make more lateral moves
Mm-hmm.
than anything else. Moves for next year.
Yeah.
There's obviously been the talk of the Panarin Bobrovsky package deal, because Panarin went and switched his agent to
Mm-hmm.
Bobrovsky's agent,
Right.
and that's going to go around in rumors for the next week and a half, and we're all just going to sit there and go, is something going to happen? Not going to happen. We're all going to sit there about 4:30 on the 25th and just go, well, that was a whole bunch of nothing. And that could very well happen at this point with that, where a deal could be close and it just doesn't get done in time. But
Yeah.
the wild card is obviously Ottawa. What happens with Mark Stone and Matt Duchene? Do they sign 0, 1, or both of them?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is, well, Doug, I cannot give you one, because to be perfectly honest, neither one of them know what they want to do at this point,
Mm-hmm.
based on the direction of what Ottawa is envisioning. The honest opinion is, one of them is, I think one goes in a trade and one goes in the offseason. I think that it may be a case of one or the other. And the third guy that they have that nobody really talks about, Ryan Zingle, is going to be interesting to see if he actually gets moved. I think he's one of those guys that gets moved between 2:30 and 3 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
on trade deadline day, because the other guys either have moved or if deals have fallen through to the point where they can't be moved.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of yo-yo effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts because I've said this to people in the past when it comes to the trade deadline. And this year's a little bit unusual because we've had a few trades, but we haven't had like the year like 2010 where we had like 5-6 trades before the Olympic break, and then we had like 15 trades right after the Olympic break.
Mm-hmm.
And then we still had about 13 to 15 trades on trade deadline day and a few pretty big ones. Now it's kind of like, oh, well, there's like 15, 20 trades before the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like 15 little tiny trades that you just go, that's it.
Yeah.
So this year might be a bit more of a mix where you see a couple more, I don't know if you call them blockbusters, but you're not going to see AHL player for AHL player like you did a lot on trade deadline day last year.
Right. Definitely. So out in the West, the standings are a little bit more grouped than they are in the East. It appears to me that the Kings are selling at this point in time, but is anyone truly out of the race at this point in the West?
Is anybody out? The answer is yes. I can say that there are teams that are out in the West. This may be bold and it may come back to haunt me, but I'm going to say that the following teams are definitely out in the West: Edmonton, Anaheim, and Los Angeles.
Okay.
They're out. They're out. There's no doubt in my mind that they are out. Anybody else? No. And for the simple reason is, does anybody know the sinking ship of Minnesota and what they're going to do at the trade deadline? And the answer is nope.
Yeah.
I do think Eric Staal does get moved though.
Right.
That's like kind of the gut feeling that he does get moved, and it could quite possibly be to Winnipeg or Vegas at this point.
Yeah.
If Vegas wants to take a swing, that's kind of the perfect guy to take a look at, especially for their third line. That fixes their third line center problem instantly.
Right.
And it's not going to cost them much because if they have to give up a defenseman to send back, we'll just bring up Eric Brandstrom. No problem.
Yeah.
Done.
So you mentioned Vegas. Obviously, they had a crazy first year in the league. They're sitting in third in the Pacific right now on 66 points. So is Stahl their main target? Do you think? Where else do you think they're looking right now to try to repeat their feat from last season?
Really, what Vegas, and this is the thing that nobody seems to know, are they actually looking for another defenseman perhaps, and then sending one back, or are they looking for a third line scoring forward? The Eric Halla injury obviously is a significant blow for the Golden Knights, and the regular season seems to be written off for him for sure. That just seems to be the consensus from people that I talk to. The playoffs is a question mark. Now that could change in the next 2 weeks. It's not like information has been readily available on his injury. It's just been, oh, he's out, and when he comes back, he comes back. My best bet would be Vegas is going to explore all their options. It's been their mantra pretty much from the start of the trade deadline, and they're going to continue to do their due diligence. And if they can nail a Duchesne or a Stone, perhaps a Zuccarello, they'll do it. If not, they'll fall back to a Stahl, maybe even a Kevin Hayes, perhaps. Or they try to swing defensively and work a trade out for a defenseman that can get them a few more points from the blue line.
Yeah.
But other than that, they really do not envision themselves as doing much. They really don't. And That may bug some Vegas fans, but honestly, at this point, there's so much conjecture and so many A, B, C, D, E, F, and G type scenarios because everybody's bunched up in the West battling for a wild card spot. So you don't have clear sellers from the West other than pretty much Edmonton, LA, and Anaheim.
Right.
And even Edmonton's not going to sell because they still think that there are Keith Gretzky's in La La Land and think the playoffs. But I'd be honest, I'd sit there and just look at it in disbelief and go, no. The best quote I heard today was, I think, from Gretzky that said, well, moving these dead contracts is hard. Yeah, there's a reason why they're called dead contracts.
Yeah, right.
It's because they're not easy to move.
Yeah.
Ever. But
right.
That's kind of how the West is right now. The West actually more or less, Doug, is in a holding pattern as they're waiting for teams to spread out a hair more and for prices to come down. And until the prices come down, supposedly, the cap doesn't break and the trades don't happen.
Yeah, and possibly that's why we will see more activity on deadline day itself as well. So
for once, it might be like how it used to be, where it's like hurry instead of hurry, wait.
Yeah.
Now it's just going to be wait, and this team's 8 points out now and can't really sell.
Right.
And boom, 3-4 trades happen on trade deadline, and that gets the ball rolling. You have 20 trades on trade deadline day. Everybody's happy. And people don't have to cover a mountain of peanut butter like Jay and Dan did about 5-6 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Which, so it's tough to watch that coverage when nothing's happening. So it's pretty brutal. So going back to the East real quickly, you have a handful of teams that are within distance of the Penguins that hold the last wild card spot right now. So you have Carolina, Buffalo, Philadelphia. Buffalo, there's a lot of talk about Jeff Skinner. Philadelphia, Wayne Simmons seems to be the hot name there. But what do you see those teams doing to try to get into the playoffs, into a playoff spot?
Buffalo's in a tough spot. You figure 2 months ago they were well entrenched. They were in third place in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And now, you go 5-19-5 over your next 29-30 games or so, and ouch. I mean, I know it's slight exaggeration. I think it's like 5-12-5 or something like that over 22, but still, it's they were 14 over 500 at one time, and now they're 7 over, and that's rough. I mean, where would they be without Linus Ullmark? I don't know. But the thing is, they're playing guys that probably they shouldn't be playing, and they're not playing guys that should be getting experience toward next season. Because honestly, did anybody expect Buffalo to be in this position? A little bit yes, and a little bit no. You figure they would have been right around or just over 500. They're 7 over 500 right now. It's probably about 5 points more than anybody could have expected at this juncture of the season. They just took kind of the long way to get there. Now, do they sell? Not really, because they really don't have all that much to sell at this point, other than maybe a fringe guy here or there. Maybe they try to get rid of Sabaka's contract somehow. I mean, there's little things that they can do, but their most important thing is worrying about keeping Jeff Skinner happy and trying to re-sign him in the summer. They're not going to trade him. There's just no way that they can do that at this point. He's so much of their offense, and with Eichel, they tend to be pretty happy. So you have to ride it out and hope that he comes back for $8.5 to $9.5 million for however many years he's going to sign for. Is it going to be 6, 7, or 8 in Buffalo? And that's kind of the question. Carolina's a more interesting case. Obviously, they've caught fire of late. It helps when you actually put the puck in the net and don't shoot 6% for the first half like they did. It's the same thing almost every time at Carolina. They start off amazing, generating all these chances, and everybody's in love with them, with their possession numbers and everything else. And why can't they score? Why do they always give up goals at the worst possible time? It's because that's the way they're built, unfortunately. That's the cold reality. And then they go on a hot streak.
Yeah.
The goaltending shows up. The offense starts to score, and everybody gets hopeful again, only for them to unfortunately fail at the most crucial moment and not make the playoffs. It feels like it's happened every year for the past 5 or 6 seasons.
Right.
It really does.
Yeah.
The reality is that's not been the case. Some years they've fallen off earlier, but they've had the same kind of general ebb and flow. This year is a little bit different, only if they can keep Curtis McElhinney somehow healthy. I mean, that's kind of been the key. Peter Mrazek's not very good. He's just not. He's not an NHL. I'm sorry, I hate to say this, people. He's not an NHL caliber goalie. He just isn't anymore. It's done, finished, whatever you want to call it. So they do need a backup goalie at some point. Scott Darling, they just treat it so badly that, basically he's home resting for the rest of the season. It's just it happens sometimes. Things just don't work out. But they need a backup goalie in the worst way, and they need to figure out what the heck they're going to do with Jordan Staal, because I think as of this morning, Staal was now skating with a non-contact jersey. And if I'm Carolina, as crazy as this sounds, I keep him as far away from that team as possible. Just because it's like Victor Rask, it's not working. It just he cannot play a top 6 role, and the minute he comes back, they're gonna force him in like the square peg into a round hole, and it's not going to happen. It's just obvious this team is playing better without him right now, and that's kind of a rough thing to watch for an aging veteran,
right,
such as Staal. They have pieces that they can at least try and make a move, because they're 3 points out. So, and they've shown that they can beat Pittsburgh, which kind of New Jersey can too. I mean, I know it's not much to say, but the idea is they could make enough moves to take a shot at this, more than say a Buffalo. They're in a little bit better of a position and have a few chips. They could even move, yes, a Dougie Hamilton. I know. I didn't want to say it, but it's kind of the elephant in the room. Everybody knows at some point a right-handed defenseman is going to have to move from Carolina if they would like to acquire a top 6 piece to add to their team. So they're in that position. Like we said, there's Philadelphia. Philadelphia can't really do much, and they're 8-1-1 in their last 10, and I think like 10-2-1 in their last 13 or something like that. They're basically going to have to replicate that over the next 10 games just to get within, say, 4 or 5 points of a playoff spot. That's how far they're out. And could they do that even with trading Wade and Simmons? Potentially. They could. They have enough young players. Nolan Patrick's playing pretty well over the second half. Oscar Lindblom is a speedy dynamo. I don't know how to explain his freakish speed.
Yeah.
Because even in the in the SEL, he was just like the Swedish. I always call it that. I call it forever that. But over in Sweden, it was just like, who is this kid? And just blowing by people. And talking to Jesper Bratt, he's like, oh yeah, this dude's fast. He's faster than I am. And I'm like, oh. It's like, look, he's faster than Miles Wood, and he can actually stop, unlike Miles Wood. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's fair. I was like, oh, it's like, okay, I get it. I'll check it out. And sure enough, you watch enough video, and yeah, pretty damn impressive. So they have look. The Flyers always could play this way. The problem was goaltending, complete mess because of injuries. And then, unfortunately, their penalty kill. Now, if they acquire a guy like Cam Talbot, they're going to still need Hart to play at least 3/4 of the game, because Cam Talbot's penalty kill save percentage is one of the 5 worst in basically history right now.
Yeah.
So when you have guys doing visualization charts on how Camp Talbot's penalty kill save percentage affects an entire team, that's you guys really want to acquire somebody. Okay, Philly, I get it. This is, but that's the kind of thing going into the thought process of GMs during this deadline. It's what moves can we make, and now it's what moves can we sometimes make laterally, as opposed to just trying to make the playoffs. It's a different dynamic now than it used to be. Even selling teams are trying to move laterally to try to sort of accelerate the clock as far as their rebuild.
Yeah. Good. All right, I'm going to throw out some names. Just want you to tell me if they get traded or not.
I love it.
And if you have an idea of where, please let me know. But you mentioned earlier there's a duo in Columbus, Panarin and Bobrovsky. Do they get traded before the deadline?
Been going back and forth with this for at least probably a week or two. Especially when I heard the news of the agent changing, I'm like, for sure. And then somebody's like, no. Ultimately, I think they do not get traded. I just, it's going to go, like I said to you earlier, it's going to go down to like 259, and there's going to be a deal on the table, and somehow it falls through. I saw this. Look, I saw this with Marian Hossa about 10 years ago, where it looked for sure he was going to Montreal all trade deadline afternoon. And at 257, the Pittsburgh Penguins came in and said, nope, we're going to acquire him. And sure enough, they had managed to for like a king's ransom and a half. I think something like that happens, but this time there is no magical third team that is able to swoop in to save the day. But, I mean, could be wrong. You never know.
All right. Carl Hagelin out in LA. He just got out there really, but do you think he's on the move too?
I think he's on the move potentially to a team in the East. There's a few teams that have looked semi-interested. It's basically to a point of a team's plan C or D, just to provide some speed at 5-on-5 and little else.
Right. Yeah, and that's partially why I think the Penguins shipped him out to begin with, because it was basically speed and nothing else at that point in time. So, we mentioned Wayne Simmons. Do you think he moves?
Simmons, I do think he moves. What team though? Anybody's guess, because there's literally 6 or 7 teams that right now could claim him ultimately. You're looking at Boston, Winnipeg, Vegas. Sheesh. I was trying to think of some of the other top ones that were at least a little bit interested. And you go down, it's like even perhaps going as far as Calgary, if they got desperate enough. If they're not so worried about getting a backup goaltender, third string goaltender, just for insurance, they might look at Simmons. Then you go a little bit further. Does one of these teams that is trying to make the playoffs make a move for Simmons? And you figure, like we said, there's 3 or 4 of those in the West, so 6, 7, maybe even 8 teams have a realistic shot at it.
Okay. How about Matt Duchene? That's a name that's definitely been on the rumor mill for a little bit now.
Duchene, and we might as well just lump in Mark Stone for the fun of it.
Right.
And while we're at it, we're just going to throw Ryan Zingle in for the wild card, just because it's like a 3-headed monster.
Yeah, right.
Walking into it. But by the way, for those scoring at home, real quick, don't worry. Corey Schneider's never winning again, so just do us a favor, turn the game off. But all kidding aside, man, Duchene really likes it in Ottawa. He's made it clear. But that team's vision for future rebuild is just wrought with disaster. Honestly, I think he gets moved. I really do. I think I think he's the one that gets moved, and Mark Stone is the one that they literally try to sign in the off season. Duchesne and Zingle probably get moved. Duchesne is going to be one of those like 1-2 o'clock deadline deals, and where he could go is pretty much anybody's guess. I think he goes west. I think Winnipeg is going to try to make a big splash somewhere. I know teams like the Islanders are interested in Kovalchuk. That's been pretty much clear since the Islanders tried to sign him in the offseason, which was kind of under the radar and nobody really mentioned it, but it was there. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, Zingle, where is he going to go? He's somebody's plan B if the plan A goes to get. I think Vegas ultimately would be a good fit for him, and I think it's where he might wind up going.
Okay.
Makes sense. They don't have to pay immensely for him. You probably can get him for a second or third in a mid or low level prospect. And I mean, his cap hit is next to nothing. It's less than $2 million. It's like $1.8 million. Why am I going to worry about this $6 or $7.35 million hit like with Mark Stone, and where I have to pay a first, a player, and maybe a prospect for this guy, whereas I can get a 25 to 30 goal scorer for cheap and plug him in on the third line. He probably gets me 5, 6, 7 goals before the end of the regular season. That's not so bad. Obviously, I'm going to beat you to the punch and throw Jimmy Howard under the bus. Jimmy Howard seems to he's going to be traded every trade deadline. He is now the Tomas Kaberle of the NHL trade deadline. Kaberle for like 3 seasons and three seasons.
Yeah.
Draft and the deadline, he was going to get moved. He's going to get moved. And finally, when he was 2 past his prime, he actually did get moved and did absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Jimmy Howard is now almost 35 years old. For people that don't know, he's almost 35. It feels like he's been around forever. That's because he has been around forever. He's still producing at a very good rate. Remember, 904 save percentage is league average now. It's not 914 anymore. So, I mean, the fact that he has a 914 save percentage is pretty significant on a god-awful Detroit team that just bleeds chances, penalty kill, whatever you want to, say about them defensively. It's pretty horrible. But it's one of those things. Does he get moved? Does Detroit really want to move him? And then if they can't sign him, they have no goaltender. They're going to have to go into free agency. And who are they going to get to sign there when everybody knows they're going to probably be one of the 5 worst teams in the league even next season? That's obviously a rough dilemma. And they know that when they sign Howard, they'll have to sign him to a 35-plus contract. They sign him for a year or 2 for cheap, and they get it over with and done with. So he probably stays just because they have no plan B. A guy like Nick Jensen can move for a lower round pick. He's a solid stay-at-home guy, even though he's 28 and just broke into the league. Maybe he gets them a 5th or 6th round pick, maybe even a 4th, if a team's desperate enough for a solid defenseman.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing that we're looking at towards the trade deadline. There's so much speculation, and yet there's not the usual flurry of moves that you would normally see.
It's been quiet for a few days now.
It's been kind of nice that it's been quiet. There's been a lot of rumors, don't get me wrong, but it's been mostly quiet, which is good. If it can stay like this for about another 4 to 6 more days, where you get in right in with T-minus a week to the deadline, and there's no other major deals, you're probably going to have a nice active trade deadline that will keep the masses happy.
Right. Definitely. So, I mean, we can't necessarily nail down specifics. Obviously, the games are started tonight, and every day changes. But how does the trade deadline impact your strategy for daily fantasy hockey? Does it have any impact, or I mean, do you still just really do the same players still rise to the top based on matchups and whatnot?
It does have some tangible impact. I notice as the season gets closer to the playoffs that it becomes a little bit easier for I would say pretty much from right after the trade line to about 2 weeks left in the regular season. So there's a window of about approximately 2.5 to 3 weeks where daily fantasy gets a tiny bit easier for everybody involved, and that's, trust me, a good thing. Goaltending matchups become a little more predictable. For example, if you were smart enough to play Jordan Binnington tonight, good, because barring some kind of like crazy collapse by sea, you get. But that's the kind of thing where I tell people, it's like, all right, if you played Pekka Rinne at only 8,100 on FanDuel tonight, okay, that was a smart move. I mean, there's certain things that you can sit there and go, but particularly with the trade deadline, it really only impacts when the bigger names go somewhere. That's where it actually has the first impact, and then you have what I like to call the secondary impact of players that normally are playing 10 and 11 minutes a game that suddenly play 16, 17, 18 minutes a night. And that's where it's like, I've got opportunities to exploit now for at least the next couple of weeks before people catch on, and then I'm screwed. And that's how you look at it. You look at it in sort of segments. And it's the same way for even season long at this point. I have one league where it's just like, I'm so bored, I just want the playoffs to start already, because literally it's to the point where, okay, I'm 18-0. I've clinched the playoff spot already. I've clinched the first round bye with about 4 weeks left. It's like, all right, bring on the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I have other leagues, obviously, where it's just like, I get such a headache. Why did I draft Gibson and Bishop at the same time? What the heck was I thinking? And now it's like I have 3 string goalies. I have 6 guys on injured reserve when you only have 1 IR slot. Well, basically, it's the one league I'm in, the IR slots only open up if the player is actually listed on the IR. If he's listed as out, it does not count on Yahoo. So it's just like, it's like, just come on, Yahoo, do it. The guy's out at least 5 games. Just put him on there. Thank me later. But that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. If a Duchesne moves, if somehow a Bobrovsky or more a Panarin, because Bobrovsky's been so off all year, I can't see a move really changing anything. He had one about 10 to 12 game period where he looked like the Bobrovsky we're used to. But I've got to be honest, I still say Sergei Bobrovsky is battling a moderate groin tear of sorts, or a strain, because you could just see it. There's something very off with his game. And I tend to think it's injury related. Maybe wrong, but it just seems like it makes too much darn sense. And again, this ties right in. Those dreaded trends in NHL DFS. This is where it gets fun.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. The Chicago power play since December 1st. Well, actually, since around Christmas, the last 2 months or so, the number 1 team in the league on the power play. Why? Patrick Kane, Dylan Strome, and Alex DeBrincat.
Yeah.
It's really that. It's absolutely that simple. And that's been that the first period over with Chicago, which, by the way, hit again tonight. So that's 31 out of the last 38 games where the first period is over as hit with Chicago.
Wow.
It's an unheard of almost 80 freaking %.
That's nuts.
I mean, it's like, come on. I think it's actually like 80.6 or 81%. I don't know. I'm only a math major when I want to be. But these type of trends, hey, if I know, that's where you can kind of merge the betting world with DFS and fantasy. If I know a team's going to score a lot of goals, I'm rostering the living daylights out of them.
Right.
I just am. Look, St. Louis tonight's another perfect example. Maybe they only score 3, but Did you expect Arizona to score that much tonight? No. Okay, so cash goalie Bennington makes sense. And he's probably not going to make enough saves to be a GPP play, but he might be enough for a cash play. And then you have the what I like to call the outliers. And this is where it gets fun. Colorado unexpectedly scoring 3 goals in Winnipeg after they've lost 8 straight, and suddenly we're going to show up now. Okay, you always have those type of games mixed in a big slate, and the thing Vancouver and LA and Washington and San Jose haven't started yet, which in of itself is like, oh wow. Obviously, the Islanders again. Just the Islanders are like a DFS, but like death nail. You don't know if Lehner or Grice is going to start because basically they never announce their goaltender till the last bitter minute.
Yeah.
Most of the time. It's the Barry Trotz way.
Of course.
So it's like, do I roll the dice? Do I pick? The problem is when you have a league where you have to pick up the goalie the day before, it's like, do I roll the dice? Hope for the best. Do I pick up the guy? But tonight I did, and it kind of paid off because Grice had 31 saves, shutout.
Right.
But do you expect Casey Cizikas to score twice? I mean, it's like a DFS nightmare trying to figure out who's going to score on the Islanders, other than say maybe Barzal and occasionally someone else. That there's just certain teams you just go, I don't want to really touch you right now. But that's the kind of thing that we're now we're looking for. It's like, okay, well, which teams are just god awful special teams wise?
Right.
What can I pick on at this point special teams wise? Or teams that are just so bad on the road, like New Jersey gives up 4 goals a game practically on the road. Okay, well, I'm going to sit there and I have to. But it's like, but mommy and daddy, I have to play Patrick Kane. I don't care if he's 9,100 on FanDuel.
Right.
And right on cue, he has 2 points already.
Right.
Now, is that a great night for him? Oddly enough, no, but they did credit him actually with a second assist out of nowhere. So he actually has 3. Laughably enough, it's like literally it just hysterically changed. I'm not kidding. I just watched
it change. Nice.
Yeah, it was originally Taze from like Cuckoo and I think it was Cahoon, and now they changed it back to Kane. So for now he has 3 points. So basically, if you're looking at this from the common sense math standpoint, Kane would have to get you 3 points at a price of 9,100 to exceed value.
Right.
Well, he now has 3 real world points. He has 2 shots. The only problem is he has 2 shots on goal. You wanted him to have a little bit more of a floor, but you look over the other lock of the night was probably Nikita Kucherov. So all right, certain team might have scored a few goals, and okay, yeah, it was ugly. Don't burn before reading. Now the difference is, say with Kucherov is, he had 4 points and he had 4 shots on goal. The little extra bit of a ceiling, and by the way, he was only 7,300 on FanDuel.
Oh,
Christmas, kids!
Wow, yeah.
Part of the underpricing that happened with Tampa when they went on that little bit of a dip.
Yeah.
At one point on DK, Kucherov was 6,500 last week.
Wow.
And I think it was like for a New York minute, somebody realized, we screwed up royally, and just lowballed Tampa's prices. I mean, Braden Point was 5,900 for the same game, and it's like, what? Wait.
Yeah, that's a little bit weird.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna plug him in and him in.
Yeah.
And they had 7 points combined. That was the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just like, okay, he had 3 points, he had 4 points. Oh, look at that. 12,400 for that mini stack, and I have money to spend elsewhere. Awesome.
Nice.
But that's the kind of thing that people should be looking for over the final month and a half of the DFS season. Before the playoffs, of course.
Of course.
Playoffs are a different animal.
Of course. Well, yeah, that Blues game is an interesting game tonight. The Blues got 2 goals on 13 shots on goal, and Joel Edmondson has 2 points already for you. So
I know,
what can
I
you do
know,
there? I
and
don't know.
I joked that Edmondson might still be a trade deadline piece
Yeah.
For St. Louis, so they can get an upgrade at least for more offensive defenseman. But
Then he scores his second goal of the year for you.
Just make a monkey out of his son. I mean, like, all right. By the way, I just want to throw this out there.
Yeah.
Ryan Boyle has scored his first goal as a Nashville
Oh,
Predator
okay.
at the most crucial time, literally.
Oh, nice.
Just as it looked like Montreal was going to take the lead, Montreal hits the post, and Boyle comes down the other way.
Oh, yeah.
Nice feed from Subban and gives Nashville the lead. By the way, we're still looking for Nashville's first line to show up, and nobody has seen them at all.
Nope.
Because it is not Forsberg Tuesday.
Yeah, apparently not.
That's a legend. That's a legend in its own. That some arrogant DFS prick made up, and somehow it's stuck. So
it's working.
Yeah, we did it over a course of the season. Thanks to Christopher Pacheco and Michael Clifford, who put up with me. We did 4 seasons of Fantasy Hockey X, and the first season, I kept joking with him. I was like, this freaking Forsberg kid keeps scoring on Tuesday. And I was like, this is something that we're on to something. And the guy likes tacos. I mean, Taco Tuesday. This is perfect.
That's right. Works out perfectly. That's
at one
wonderful.
Point, amusingly enough, the Nashville Predators actually sent me a box of tacos from a local Nashville eatery.
Nice.
Because it's like, it was like compliments of Philip Forsberg and the Nashville Predators, and I'm just like, really?
That's great.
I was like, I'll take plane tickets.
There you go.
Nashville game just for the. I'll just go down Broadway for their version of Broadway for the experience.
That's right. That is a hell of a town.
It's like Nashville Mardi Gras.
Yeah, it is. And Arvidsson adds another, as we speak.
I knew it was coming.
Yep.
I knew. Okay, that's fair enough. I mentioned them. They get angry.
Yep.
And they do things. Yeah, I know. One of my friends is like it's like because she lives in Milwaukee, so she knows the AHL team when Arvidsson was in the A.
Okay.
And followed him quite extensively, and now it's just like, yeah, I know, don't remind me. But yeah, it's crazy to think now, like, with the way NHL DFS is going in particular, and at least now with the NFL season over, thank you, Lord.
Yes.
And there's that little bit of a window before March Madness kicks in, and then obviously baseball. That at least the sites are experimenting with things, and hopefully they will keep experimenting.
Yeah.
Like the showdowns and the tiers and the captain's picks and things like that, and trying to get something more credible than having something fill with 6 hours before a Thursday lock.
Yeah.
It just seems like they could pay an NHL DFS writer probably to construct these contests, and they would do a better job. It's like the equivalent of your advanced stat guy that can sit there and says, if I tell this GM no 5 times, they'll probably make the playoffs. It's kind of along that line of logic where, if you use a little bit of an ounce of common sense, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that never quite happens with NHL DFS because for whatever reason, again, we are a little bit of the redhead stepchild of fantasy sports.
Well, I write about fantasy soccer, so believe me, I know the feeling.
I know it.
Yeah,
I know a guy. Geez, I know a guy that does. He's unbelievable at it. It's just like, really, dude. How do you do that? How do you do you? Yeah, I don't understand how the guy comes up with lineups and just no matter what he wins a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, to be fair, that's more like it's the actual like London overseas version where you're picking players, but still, it's the same logic probably works for DraftKings.
Right.
with that.
Right.
I've seen it work because I've seen other people use his style of play, and it basically is almost foolproof. There's none of that in hockey, unfortunately.
Right. Definitely not.
No, never.
All right, Chris. Well, I really appreciate talking to you, man. You know your stuff, and thanks for taking your time. I know it's an hour later over there where you're at there, so I
That's
appreciate
all
your
right.
time, man.
Still early for me.
Yeah, still some
Still
hockey to
got
watch too. Yeah.
still got 2 late games to watch, and try and like scramble and write stuff for tomorrow morning,
There you go.
like a little kid.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. I appreciate it again, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime. Maybe as the playoffs get a little closer or whatnot. All right.
That sounds good, Doug, as always.
Yeah, man. Have a good night, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
All right, have a good one.
Bye. All right, everybody. That was Chris. His link is still there in the chat, I believe. If you want to check in with him a little bit further, obviously knows his stuff when it comes to hockey, and when it comes to the DFS daily fantasy stuff. That is mine. Again, I plugged the soccer stuff. Listen, don't sleep on soccer. But this is Chris's info again. So make sure to give him a follow over there on Twitter. Definitely knows his stuff about hockey. And we'll be seeing what's going to happen with the trade deadline. I kept my fandom out of it. Didn't want to talk about my personal team, and we're not going to do that. So I appreciate him coming on tonight and having a very in-depth chat with me about the upcoming trade deadline, which is February 25th. And hopefully the folks that are covering the trade deadline will have a lot more to talk about on the day of. So thanks again to Chris, and thank you all for watching. Let us know what you think as well.